Fan2Fan Detroit is a free-flowing conversation that occasionally touches on mature subjects.
This is Rick Mahorn. Listen to Fan2Fan Detroit on the Planet Ant Podcast Network.
Welcome in, everybody, to episode 8 of Fan2Fan Detroit. I'm your host, Andrew Norris. This is my producer, Double P, producer Parker. What's going on, my man?
Oh, hanging out, hiding from viruses, just staying alive and really needing a haircut. Dude, my haircut's so bad.
I know, I finally gave up on the coronavirus playoff beard. I had to. It was too much. I was just looking too ugly. I was FaceTiming a lady friend, and I was looking at myself, and I was like, all right, it's time. I went and took a shower immediately after and trimmed it off. Now I'm just looking handsome, fly, whatever you want to say. But I'm avoiding the coronavirus in the best possible way. I went up to Amish land and am in Gladwin, Michigan with nobody around me.
Are they cool? Do they know that that's what you call it up there?
I hope so.
Find out.
Yeah. Hey, man, we fish together all the time. We're cool. Okay, we're cool. But what I found out, before we get to sports, before that, I want to talk about associations because they've ruined fishing on this lake. They've blocked me off from all my good ponds, fences up, everything, just to keep the nice, quiet Amish people from fishing in the lake, and it's ridiculous. Lake Lancer, Gladwin, Michigan, somebody start a friggin' petition. Do you have anything to say about that?
No, I don't have anything to say about fishing in Gladwin, dude. I don't have anything to say about it.
Well, we got some cool stuff for you guys today. We are going to basically do a run around of the whole league, or not the whole league, all the leagues. Everything that's kind of come up over the last week, all the new, even though there's very little of it, all the new news, if you will. Last touch on the NFL draft. We did that last week, but as you guys probably saw, the beginning of our show kind of got cut off. So we are going to give you kind of a last thoughts on the NFL draft. We're going to get you updated on everything coronavirus with sports, down to the UFC, down to European soccer, minor league baseball, whatever you want to know about. Of course, we got to talk about Michael Jordan in The Last Dance. And then we have a little surprise for you at the end, something that's going to be kind of fun that I think you might want to stick around for.
Should we do a little preview?
Just flash one picture. I know you know which one I want you to flash. We're not going to talk about it. Just flash it. Just show the picture.
This one?
That's the one. That's the one. So if you're really ready to be entertained, stick around.
Yeah, it's going to be a good time.
Well, before we get to that, it is time for the shoot around, your weekly warm up for everything sports. Parker, I know we have some cool things to talk about here, so why don't you get us started?
Yeah, so there's five-ish kind of main headlines right now in sports. We'll just kind of do a quick run through them. I feel like we're kind of at a point now where you and I this last week have had a pretty tough time, like really finding 90 minutes of sports content that's really worth a shit, that's worth anything. So we're just going to kind of breeze through kind of a bunch of headlines. I feel like that's the best way to be economical, both with our time and our attention spans. I want to start with like this first. I want to start with this. As a soccer person, I'm going to dive right into like the big landmine here. The Women's Soccer Federation had their lawsuit against the U.S. Soccer Federation. I'm sorry, the U.S. Women's National Team, had their lawsuit against the U.S. Soccer Federation thrown out. They basically were trying to sue the U.S. Soccer Federation for equal pay, which this tweet very clearly demonstrates. And good old sports loving you and I cup of Joe Biden comes flying in off the top rope to give his terrible opinion. And without like trying to keep this to I guess with the exception of this last 5 minutes, a stick to sports podcast. This is non-politically, politics aside, this is some dumb bullshit that makes me angry. This is a pander. This is the easiest pander, and you don't get a lot of opportunities to somebody to point to a politician and go, that guy's lying to you. This guy's lying to you right here. This guy's lying to you. The federal government has nothing to do with World Cup funding. It's a three-way World Cup, it's a triple feature. Mexico, Canada, and the United States all have the 2026 World Cup bid. And I just, again, not saying anything about what it is. This is very clearly Joe Biden attempting to use the women's issue to dodge a women's issue. And I think that we're kind of in like a new normal for that. Sorry, hang on. I got to put a coin in the new normal jar. Where politicians are going to start doing this and people are going to start doing this. And I just want everybody to be really aware that things like this are typically lies and typically panders. Whether or not the appeal for the U.S. women's national team will go through is its own thing. They have some problems with their lawsuit. The short version being that they're kind of looking for a pay inequality that doesn't have a lot to do with the U.S. Soccer Federation. It has more to do with FIFA, soccer's governing body. And, if you want to tell me FIFA's corrupt, there's whole John Oliver segments about how corrupt FIFA is. You're not breaking any news there. I just want everybody just to be aware as we enter the last 16 months of this election cycle that shit like that's only going to get worse. And just like be aware that if Joe Biden were to become president, he's not going to do that. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, and also just because I'm not as educated on this as you are, if you want funny but yet filled with information, I don't know how to word this, but if you want something that's funny and can also teach you some things, go watch John Oliver because he gets you there. But yeah, and to clarify, neither of us are saying that we know that there's a problem in women's sports with pay. We know WNBA players' max contracts being at $100,000 is a problem. We know that them getting paid 20% or whatever that number is of the men's is a problem. That's not the discussion here. The discussion is how Biden went about it, how it's not honest, and how it's kind of or totally pandering, or at least it seems that way on the surface.
This is like a medium high level pander, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree. And it's worded like a pander. Like it's not even hidden well.
You think Joe Biden knows how to use anything except a typewriter?
I hope so. I sure do hope so. What do we got next?
Let's move past that minefield.
Yes.
Into the world of kind of conjecture. Have you seen this? You've seen this.
I have seen this.
You want to talk a little bit about this?
I do. So it was reported that minor league baseball season is canceled. Obviously, you can see here from minor league baseball that is not true as of yet. Now, the way it's looking right now is a little bit different than normal. It looks like we're not going to have the typical, like 6 levels of minor league baseball all the way down to low A and rookie ball because of obviously everything that's going on, but they're going to have to fit it into one level. Now, this is a good thing in some ways and a bad thing in a lot of other ways. It's good, I think, for the Tigers' top prospects because those guys now who we're going to play in Double A, Single A are going to be playing with the best prospects in the world. So this is now there's going to be one league. It's going to be the second best baseball league in the world probably. And that's who our prospects are going to be playing against. The best of the best who can't be the best yet, if that makes any sense. However, go ahead.
No, you go.
Those lower level guys are the ones who are going to get screwed. The Single A guy who was hitting 7th in the lineup, who's 22 years old, who's raw still and still trying to perfect his swing, still trying to, hit that next level, take that next step to becoming a Double A or a Triple A or maybe a eventual utility type MLB level player. Those guys are really going to have trouble because there's not going to be at bats. There's not going to be innings for them. I really doubt we'll be getting, 6-7 games in a week for minor or major league baseball right now. So that's going to screw up the entire rotation. You don't want Casey Mize taking 11 days off in between starts because you had to get 6 starters in there. Casey Mize gets his start every 5 days if you're doing it right. Matt Manning gets his start every 5 days if you're doing it right. If they're playing 100-game season, which seems honestly probably higher than it will be, a guy like Daz Cameron needs 400 at-bats. He has to play every single one of those games. Isaac Paredes, the same with him. But if you go down and get a guy a little bit lower in Double A, what are you going to do with that guy? Or even Riley Green, the number 3 pick from last year. He might not be ready to face these high AAA guys yet. He's 20 years old. He has 80 minor league at-bats or something along those lines. He might not be ready to face these guys who are, might have been a month away if the season started in April from being called up to a major league roster and being part of a rotation or part of a lineup. So I think it's got negatives and positives. But they have to find a way to get the negatives to be as little as possible, you have to find a way to get that season as long as possible.
So there's the big baseball rumor right now is contraction, right? That they're going to kind of get rid of single A, or that it's been discussed, or that it might happen because of this.
That has been discussed. It was actually being discussed before all of this.
Yeah.
It's going to be on a permanent basis if they get their way. But that would change baseball forever. You have to remember, baseball has between 45 and 50 rounds for their draft. Mm-hmm. There is AAA, AA, single A, low A, high A, and rookie ball. Those are all full rosters within your Major League Baseball organization that a guy can work up through. So if they did decide to go ahead and do that, you have to shorten the draft. You're just closing down. And if you look at some of these minor league cities, those cities love those teams. This is like Erie loves the Seawolves. Toledo loves the Mud Hens. And we're not going to be losing those teams. But
West Michigan, Grand Rapids, where I'm from, those Whitecaps games are big community features.
Yeah.
They're important, I think, to the fabric of the community. My question is this. Do we need low A, high A, single A? Do we need
100%. And the reason is right now you can get drafted at 17 years old. If you graduate high school, you can be drafted to the MLB.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a big part of that draft, obviously, is going to go into potential. So in baseball, you're rated on a 20 to 80 scale. You're hitting, fielding, pitching, power, whatever. It's rated on a 20 to 80 scale. When these guys are 17, 18 years old, they're looking at a 30, 40 on that scale. You're trying, and a guy who's in the pros is probably looking at a 50, 60. But a guy in AAA is a 40 or a 50. And the difference between a 20-30 on these scales and a 40-50 is huge. It's the difference of 3 or 4 years worth of professional baseball in most cases. So if you do lose single A and everything lower, you're losing half your draft rounds. You're losing a large part of your player development system. Because you got to remember, just because somebody makes it to AA doesn't mean they stay, especially in baseball, where 70% of the sport is what's going on in between your ears. The 6 inches in between your ears determines how your day is going to go in baseball, especially as a hitter. And sometimes you just have to go back to those lower levels and get some ABs, get some hits, strike a couple guys out if you're on the mound, whatever you got to do, get that confidence back and find it. And I think if you lose A ball and lower than that, you're losing 18 to 20-year-olds pretty much from your minor league systems.
Well, what percentage of these guys are even going to have a chance to whiff the major leagues, or even like AAA ball?
I think AAA is probably around 25 to 35%. It's not a huge number, but I don't think the problem is really with the lower end guys. I think the problem is more with your young, higher end guys. You want to draft a guy at 18. Taking Riley Green at 3 at 18 with the potential he has, where you have 6 years to mold him. Let's say worst case scenario, Riley Green is in the major leagues until he's 24. He's under team control until he's 30. So you want to get these guys when they're as young as possible because you just have control forever in baseball. So I just think you lose a large part of the development system, which might be it's definitely more important than it is in basketball. I mean, in basketball, the number 3 pick is expected to score 15 plus points the first season. It's more important than it is in football. We see rookie quarterbacks go out there and just ball out. It works similarly in hockey, but I just think you lose a lot of what it takes to get from even a college level player to a major league level player. You really have to take small steps in baseball. You rarely see a guy taking, going from single A to the pros in 1 year. The last time I can remember seeing it happen with the Tigers, it worked out great. It was Rick Porcello in 2009, but that's like the last time it happened with the Tigers, a guy taking a jump that big, and it was only because he had an amazing spring training. But my biggest problem with it really is the fact that you're closing down these franchises. It really, a lot of these lower level franchises are run like a family business in small stadiums with owners that really care and are really excited to get these young kids in there. And I just think you lose a lot of the purity of the minor league system of baseball if you just trim it down to AA and AAA.
In my opinion, that's, for a lot of people, I think all that baseball really has left for them. So,
yeah. I would agree. It's statistics and all that. Yeah.
You want to talk about the NCAA? I think we've got 2 NCAA stories real quick to peruse through.
Yes, I do. Go right ahead.
The NCAA has served Louisville with basically, I forget what the exact term is, But they sent him a letter that said that they done goofed, basically, with their recruiting from when Rick Pitino was there. It centered around Bruce Bowen, who was a very high-level recruit, 5-star recruit, I believe, for them.
Way back in the day.
Yeah, for sure. Does this mean anything to you? Do you give a shit about this? Does anybody care anymore?
All right, so I don't care, but the reason I do care about what Pitino did. I don't care about recruiting violations, and there's a couple of reasons. First, I'll start with Pitino. Pitino was out there getting these 17, 18-year-old kids, prostitutes, hookers, strippers, when they came to his campus. And if there's prostitutes, hookers, and strippers, there's probably cocaine. So he's doing some really bad things. But I do not care about these recruiting violations. And the reason for that is everybody is doing it. And that's everybody. Kentucky's doing it. I mean, we know Calipari's doing it. There's no way you get this recruiting class year after year. Everybody's got the facilities now. Everybody's got the money in their program. Everybody's coach is a salesman at this point. Like, the colleges know what they're doing.
Dabo Sweeney, if he wasn't a college coach, would be Facebooking you invitations to his pyramid scheme. Those are the only two occupations that guy can have.
Exactly. They're used car salesmen at this point. You basically have to swallow any amount of like pride or lack of guilt. You have to get rid of that to be a college coach at this point. I'm obviously, being a bartender in a downtown setting, I get a little bit of luck with, running into some athletes or some celebrities. And, I've heard on multiple occasions, and, this isn't, I know I'm just a guy of the podcast, but I've heard from players.
Okay, hang on. Let me step in and say that what he's about to say is very well sourced.
Yes. That somebody got offered.
Well, what he's going to be talking about here in a second is what the real kind of nuts and bolts of the recruiting process is, and what really happens to a lot of these guys. You know how it is. If you work in a bar and you are open with people, typically people are going to kind of talk to you about whatever it is that they like. And so I guess what I'll do for now is I'm going to skip around a little bit and talk about kind of what's happening right now with COVID and whether or not like sports leagues are opening, whether or not they're closing, whether or not they're just delayed. We're going to talk a little bit about that here. So first and foremost, I want to bring up this right here. And it's that supposedly baseball people are saying that on June 10th, they're going to restart spring training, and July 1st will be opening day, and everybody's going to be playing at home all at the same time. And I mean, sure, right? Sure, that could happen. I don't know if either of us think that that's maybe the right thing to do. And I think Andrew will have some pretty good thoughts about that. But just because you can open doesn't mean you should open. We don't know if this is real. Baseball is a swirling mountain of rumors. And by the way, so is basketball, right? We've got this right here. People are asking agents, and some agents are saying that the year is canceled. And LeBron says, no, it's not. Now, this is from 6 days ago. And the hardest problem that I've had kind of sourcing some of this stuff is that it changes every 12 hours. There are some good sources, some ESPN articles or some athletic articles, and some people are talking to some reporters, but generally speaking, it doesn't seem a whole lot like anybody knows what's going on. Hey, buddy.
That was fun. I don't know what happened. Sorry, everybody.
You want to finish on your recruiting stories? I kind of jumped ahead.
Yes.
Come back.
So again, I'm not going to name names. I will tell you a team. It's the Detroit Lions. It was a late round draft pick. There's your hint. Do your research. But I have been told that this person, when they were a top recruit, and when they were going to college campuses, for instance, Florida offered them a house, like a full mansion-sized house. Got offered $1 million by Alabama, $1 million by USC, and this wasn't for a quarterback or a running back, top running back in the class or anything like that. But it was for a top level recruit, but at a position of less superiority, I guess, to the other positions, less importance to the other positions, was offered everything except for by 2 schools, believe it or not, which was Georgia, which surprised me, and Michigan was the other. Said that, he grew up in a football family, so he chose between some clean schools because he didn't want to get in trouble. Money was already there. But those schools are dirty. Just like basketball, the schools are dirty. Football schools are dirty. If we're going to pretend, the only time the NCAA cares about recruiting violations is when the NCAA gets caught with recruiting violations. You notice the NCAA is never the one catching the person or the school. It's always some other source catching the school, and then the NCAA being like, I'm flabbergasted, which it's about as fake as Roger Goodell attempting to have a personality during the draft. It's just not there. It's just not there, dude.
Oh, we didn't talk about this. This got cut from our episode, but Roger Goodell halfway through sitting down in the chair and looking like the least uncomfortable person who's ever looked in the chair. I heard a couple of different sports guys who have back problems say that they were pretty sure that the way he looked and the way he was moving, that he slipped a disc in his back or something and was maybe on some painkillers, and so that's why he kind of was a little weird and I don't know.
He had to be drunk, right? He's hugging the TV, he's a weird man, dude, and he's just a robot. He's a machine.
I think that, he's a robot. I mean, a robot is the only person who could possibly do that job. Hey, under how many, when the NFL decides to restart, and so far all word from the NFL is they're kicking off. It's happening.
Schedule's coming out next week.
Need to get coronavirus over under 2.5 before they shut the league down.
So I know you're kind of phrasing this as a joke, but I have a real answer for it. 1, because the second one guy gets it, your team has to quarantine for 14 days. You're going to have a game or 2 in those 14 days. So the second one guy gets it, the entire schedule for the rest of the season for pretty much every team is going to be screwed up. So it's going to be just like the NBA. And if they rush it back, we're not getting football. And that's, I think, needs to be the overlying thing with all of these owners and commissioners is you have to take your time with this, because if you don't, you're going to lose even more money in the long run.
Yeah.
So just please, sports, don't wait until 2021. If it gets close to that, rush it. We'll see what happens. But
great. Yeah. This is the most risque podcast.
Yes.
We're really bumping.
We're all right.
Yeah. Okay, so I kind of skipped this while I kind of moved into this while you were gone. We can jump back into it. Was the roundup of kind of where sports are right now. What's delayed and what's not. I have some good news. Baseball is back in Korea. Baseball is restarting, which I feel like is the equivalent of seeing one butterfly after the storm, right?
Yes. Oh yeah.
There is good in the universe. So Korean baseball is back.
And for you diehard Tiger fans, on ESPN last night, Warwick Saupold was making the start for one of those teams. The former Tigers long reliever who didn't debut until I think he was 27 years old and made it a full season on the team. Yeah, he's the opening day starter in Korea.
Yeah. I talked a little bit about this for just a half second. Do you have any thoughts on this? I just kind of said I don't think it's a good idea. It makes me nervous.
No, they're gonna do it. It's gonna be one level. It'll take, if they get an MLB season started here soon, it'll be almost the exact same thing of that. One level, 30 teams, weird schedules, playing probably in 3 or 4 locations for everybody, either in Florida or some southern state. And it'll kind of be a mess, but we'll have it. I know, but that's. I think the NBA is looking at Disney World, and baseball is looking at all the spring training locations. So that would be Arizona and Florida.
So, yeah, my mother is a medical assistant in Florida, and I can tell you it ain't that great down there right now. But their governor did declare sports. What's the phrasing? A necessary business? I forget. Whatever.
Essential.
Yeah, thank you. Essential business. So that's how like the WWE have been going. That's how UFC 249 is still going to happen. That's how they're doing it. They're doing it in Florida, and they kind of gave all of the fighters like the opportunity to back out, or like if they like one fighter was like, we couldn't get my trainer here because he got stuck because of the travel restrictions, and that makes a lot of sense to me that that person would therefore be allowed to.
Yeah. And it just makes a lot more sense with UFC or even the WWE than it does with the other sports. It's one-on-one most of the time. It's small groups of people, whereas football, you're looking at 100 people per team on the sidelines. So.
Yeah, man, football is just if you take just the players and the staff for both teams, that's like 200 people.
Yeah, I mean, you got 53 players on the roster. You got at least one coach for every position group. Yep. You have to have ambulance and medical personnel on site in case something happens, and that's for both teams.
We probably got 30 people doing the show. Cameras and producers and graphics people and all that stuff. That's probably 30, 50 people on top of it.
So what do you think? We kind of talked about this before the show, but we didn't really get into it. When sports do start back up, do you think announcers will be part of the crews at the stadium, or do you think they're more likely to be at home with a monitor and calling it off of that?
I mean, at home with a monitor certainly sounds better. I mean, those guys are big bucks. Talent, that's big money. Tony Romo is getting paid, I think, more money than he was when he was a quarterback. Peyton
Manning's about to get $20 million a year.
It does. Is that official? I mean, I've kind of seen some reports that Peyton Manning was finally done doing his various places, and
I believe it's official.
Cool.
I believe so.
He's going to be awesome. I'm excited to listen to Peyton talk about football from the booth.
Yes. What else we got COVID related?
What's that?
What else do we have COVID related? What are the other sports doing?
An interesting perspective to look at is soccer, because European soccer, there's like one league per country. Really, there's 2 or 3 leagues per country, but there's one major league per country. And there's a shitload. I don't know if you know this, but there's a lot of countries in Europe. So Belgium, the Netherlands, and France are done. They've called the season. They aren't announcing anything. The Premier League, much like basketball, the NBA, is hold on, I wrote a quote down from an article that I thought was like really, 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 really good. Where'd it go? A destructive ass backwards mess.
That's how they describe the Premier League?
That's how they describe the Premier League.
So what I'm confused on with the Premier League is you pretty much have your champions crowned already, correct?
Mathematically, sure. Yeah, Liverpool's a gajillion points ahead of everybody.
So do you really think they're going to risk, maybe next season for Champions League positioning? Because that's pretty much what they'd be doing.
Sure, yeah. I think that there's enough of the season left that it doesn't matter. And positioning is important. And I just think that also there's like the TV revenue stuff. There's a lot of TV revenue stuff where you have to demonstrate that you attempted to come back in order to like get the money from the TV broadcast, like the broadcast money anyway. And at the end of the day, that's what a lot of these leagues are really worried about, is that they won't get the broadcast money, because that's the big keep the lights on money.
Right. That's what I've been trying to explain to most people is the fans in the stadium is one thing. The only sport that might really affect is football. The money comes from the TV deals. 85% minimum of the money comes from the TV deals, straight into the owner's pockets, by the way, in American sports. Yeah. I don't know how it works in England.
The MLS is in kind of a precarious place because like you can't restart the MLS in November and play games in Toronto or Vancouver or Columbus or New England. You can't play soccer in December in Columbus. Or Canada, right? Because it's cold and they don't have like domes on there. What are you gonna do in Seattle? All those places. But the good news is in Germany, they're about 3 weeks away from kicking off again, assuming the government gives them the okay to do so. They've begun individual training. They've kind of done like team training. So European countries, it seems like, are kind of slowly inching their way towards it. Same thing with Spain and also with Italy. They're kind of slowly getting there real slow. It seems like all the leagues in Europe want to restart.
Yeah, I'm looking at the Premier League standings. Like, there's less than 10 games left. I just don't get the point. I just don't. The risk. I mean, you don't have a long off season in soccer, so you're looking at June and July and like a couple days in August, and then you're right back at it. Why would you risk the following season to get the last 10 games in? I mean, the fourth place team. So the fourth place team has a 7-point lead. Oh, I'm sorry, only a 3-point lead on Man United. So it is close, but it's just not worth the entirety of next season.
Yeah. Liverpool's so far ahead of everybody right now. Like if
they've lost one game this year,
Liverpool would still be setting like win records for whole Premier League seasons. They're like those Warriors teams. That's how.
Yeah, I mean, if they would have won out, they'd be sitting on 112 points for the season.
Yeah, I think the record was 90 something too.
Yeah, it was whatever it was last year because them and Man City broke it.
So basketball. Do you want to talk about whether or not basketball is coming back? Do you want to talk about that? I showed. I don't know where to go. This one? Yeah, I showed this.
Okay, cool. So I'm gonna go ahead and choose to believe LeBron every time. Like, there's nobody who's more interconnected that has the ability to say whatever he wants than LeBron James. And we've heard multiple proposals from the NBA. And it seems like the best one, if you go to Yahoo and read Keith Smith's article, is the Walt Disney World play the whole season there. They have multiple courts. Again, you're going to get a weird schedule. Even if it's the playoffs, you're going to get a weird schedule. But you got to take what you get when it comes to the coronavirus sports world. You have to take what you get.
Yeah.
And if that means we have to go down to 5-game series and we're playing in Disney World and you have one day off and there's 4 courts being played on at the same time, then that's what it is. But more than any other sport, I think the NBA needs to continue because it's the only sport that's deep into their season that we don't know who the champion is. Sure, you have the NHL, but it sounds like Justin Trudeau pretty much made it impossible for the NHL to come back unless they also have all the teams in America, because now every NHL player, I don't know why he singled out NHL players, but every NHL player who goes to Canada now is subject to a necessary 14-day quarantine.
Well, because hockey is the only sport that it's like hockey, curling, and then Jonathan David. Like those are the only 3 sports in Canada right now.
Yeah. So I think unless, again, the NHL does the same thing where they move everybody down to a southern state and plays everything there. But I think that's less likely just because I haven't heard anything on it yet.
ESPN had an article from a bunch of NHL guys that said that they're basically just planning on pushing the season a month or 2 and starting in December, and that they might skip the All-Star break and that they'll play like 70, 75 games, which in my opinion is, if you're a hockey fan, you got to be thanking something. You got to be thanking your hockey gods, because that would be the best sports season you could possibly get. So
and the NBA has had a similar idea, but with the NBA, I think it'll be permanent. Whereas if this season ends in August, we're going to start seeing, I believe, the start of the NBA season on Christmas Day. I think that'll be opening night from now on.
Did you see the NBA push the draft lottery and the draft combine?
I did, and it gave me hope. It gave me some hope. It means that they're still fighting for the season. They're still fighting for the playoffs, which we knew, but that's like a actual move that says we're not just doing it to, kind of give some people false hope. We're doing it because we believe we're going to get a season in.
The one sport I just don't want to come back is college football, because colleges are the last place you want to be right now, man. Germ pools. Like,
there's no way we're going to see college football. The campuses are going to be saying you're not going to be able to get teams there for practice. I would say there's less than a 10% chance we see college football next year.
I would say you said something earlier that I was like, there's a less than 1%. Oh, I think there's a less than 1% chance we have fans in the stadium at all this year.
I would agree. In the year 2020 and probably for the first couple months of 2021, I really don't think we'll see fans in the stands until there is a mass distributed vaccine. I just think it's too risky to throw 40,000 people.
500,000 tests a day. We're never going to.
Right. And you just can't throw 40,000 people in the same place, shoulder to shoulder with each other for a while. And it's going to be okay. We're going to be able to look, like, this is one thing I've thought about a lot. We're going to be able to look back on this in 20 years when it's all over and we're way past it. And we're going to see like we're going to see like an NBA champion winning the championship with no media rushing the court, with nobody in the stands. They're just sitting there celebrating. It's going to be eerie when it happens. It's going to be like an amazing thing to look back on and just kind of see what we had to go through. And I think sports will really be the best, kind of like it is with anything. After something major happens that changes the world, it's always the best thing to bring everybody back together and kind of, stitch that wound and get everything working again. So I'm really excited for it when it happens, but I'm also really excited for like after the fact when we get to look back on it.
It's going to be very weird to hear Kawhi Leonard's exuberant shouts of "Oh boy, we won!" after he wins.
That's a good one, Park. That's a good one right there.
Let's move on to the Jordan doc.
Real quick,
talk about COVID. I'm done with it.
Real quick before we do that, I want to give a shout out. You put this in our notes here, but I want to give a shout out to Steve Ballmer for buying the Forum. It's such a genius move. It is such a genius move. He gets the arena that the Lakers played in for 32? Yeah, from 67 to 99, 32 years. There's 10 plus championships in that place. And now he makes it the Clippers. That is now the Clippers' place of business. Genius move. I will never root for the Clippers, but Steve Ballmer, one of the best owners in all of sports.
Yeah, he's come in and done the thing quite well. A great move. A move I think that had been kind of coming for a little while, about a year or two, right? I mean, they've been trying to get out of the Staples Center for a while. And I think it makes sense for them to get out of the Staples Center. You know, you have your own identity. You don't need to be little brother anymore. I mean, they're legit.
Exactly.
So
yeah, and it's just embarrassing when you're, the third seed in the West playing against the first seed, and it's the middle of February and you're getting booed in a home game. Like, you just can't have that when you're trying to compete for titles, especially if you meet up in the Western Conference Finals, because that will shift the series. It will do it.
Absolutely. That's 7 road games if you're the Clippers.
Yeah. So do you want to do our NFL draft wrap up or last dance first?
Yeah, I realized as soon as I said that we had meant to do that too, because that's actually like some stuff we've got some good thoughts on. Post draft, do you want to say a paragraph about the Lions late round pick that got cut? Just like a sentence or two.
Got cut
because we lost all stuff.
Sure. So Lions rounds 4 through 7. Obviously, we were all super happy, I think, with the first 3 rounds. Even if you didn't love the Okuda pick or love the Swift pick, you probably loved one or the other. And everybody loved the Okora pick, and most people loved the Jackson pick. So obviously, we're super happy with those. But just a quick touch. I'm just going to kind of break these guys down for you real quick on the fly, and then we'll move on. With the 121st pick in the draft, we took offensive guard again, Logan Stenberg out of Kentucky. From watching him and everything I've heard the real pros talk about him, he's mean, he's physical, but he's just not quite perfect mechanically yet. He's got good size. He's 6'6", 315, but he's got an issue with his arms. He's got little arms, little T-Rex arms, which is really important, in an interior offensive line position, because you got to be able to get up into the chest of the guy and force him back. You don't even want to be a step off that line. You have to force him back behind the line. And with those short arms, it gets a little bit harder to create that leverage. But it's a guy who, as you're going to hear a lot with these late round picks that we're not necessarily used to having, has a chance to develop into a real starter in the NFL. Him and Jonah Jackson can really fight it out for who's going to be that future guard, who's going to kind of take that Graham Glasgow role, and who's going to kind of take that Joe Dow role from last year, who's going to be the guy rotating in, and who's going to be the guy getting most of the starters minutes. So I'm a big, big fan of that pick. But the next pick, I think, is where people get excited. That is Quintez Cephas out of Wisconsin. Took him with the 166th pick in the draft. And I know we called Kenny Galladay when he got in the league. He was Minitron. Well, this guy is Minitron. He is Kenny Galladay Jr. He is the exact same player. He is pretty slow. He's a little bit slower than Kenny. Kenny's got a little bit more speed. He ran a 4.7 340 at the combine. But he had the highest contested catch rate out of anybody drafted up to that spot. So anybody before him, that's the Jerry Judys, that's the CeeDee Lambs, the highest contested catch rate out of any of those guys. He showed up in big games, 7 catches, 122 yards against Ohio State in the Big Ten title game. The only negative with him, really, like I said, is the speed, and he's got tight hips. He's got a little bit of trouble going side to side. He's not super agile, but I don't think that's what they're looking for with this guy. They're looking for the Kenny Galladay guy. You don't see Kenny running a ton of slants. You're seeing Kenny go out 15 yards, then he might cut, but it's just to get open. It's not a true slant route. And this is going to be a guy just like that. And as we found out, Quinn loves those guys. He loves them, and I do too. You just got to catch the ball.
It just becomes more about what you can do than what you can't do, right?
Exactly. You're not looking for a do-it-all player. You're looking for a guy to fit your scheme, fit you for specific moments that hopefully you can eventually develop into a Kenny Galladay type player who, by the way, I read an article yesterday that had him as a top 10 receiver in football.
He's floating right around there.
He is, in full season of Stafford. With the 172nd pick in the NFL draft, running back Jason Huntley out of New Mexico State. This is going to be your punt and kick returner. He's got some of the best vision on punts and kicks I've ever seen. He's fast, 4.40 at his pro day. He wasn't at the combine, so he's super fast. He's small. He's like 5'8", 175 pounds or something like that, and he is agile, but he's not freak agile. He's not NFL top-level agile, which I think is holding him back. So he gets hit hard, and that's something they're going to really have to watch. But as I was saying last week before it got cut out, he can really, I think, slide into kind of that J.D. McKissick role and do almost the exact same thing. If you get him 3 carries and 2 catches a game, you're going to have 3 games this season where that equates to 50, 60 yards because he broke off a big play. He's going to be kind of your secret weapon. He's a guy I'm really excited for. And
he's the guy I like the most of these kind of late round picks. I like that we have one of every kind of running back. We've got a real stable, one of every kind.
Yep, especially if Bo Scarborough can carry what he did at the end of last year, and he can be, if we need him as a third down back every once in a while, he can fit that role. But I'm hoping Bo ends up being the 4th running back on the depth chart, and Jason Huntley ends up being the 3rd. But I think you're almost always going to see Huntley as a punt or a kick returner for at least his first year. And then at 197, the one pick that I don't love, it's John Pennicini, D-tackle out of Utah. He's big, he's strong, he's physical, he's smart, but he's just not quite the athlete you need to make it at that next level. Doesn't have great balance. He can be tossed to the ground a lot when he's rushing the passer. And he's not great at stopping the run. He's good. He's not great at stopping the run. He only had 4 sacks and 14 tackles for loss combined over the last 2 years. But it's a guy with size and IQ. So those guys can always turn into something. Just because he doesn't have Pro Bowl potential doesn't mean he doesn't have the potential to be a really good depth piece. So, again, 5th round pick. I'm not going to get mad at you for taking a risk, taking a guy you like specifically. You're allowed to be the smartest guy in the room when the 5th round comes. So...
Yeah, right. Yes.
Yeah, as long as you're not taking a long snapper like he did in year 1 in the 6th round. But, if you want to take a D-tackle who has size and IQ and maybe isn't athletic enough, and that's why he fell down to the 5th round, go ahead and do it. See what you can turn him into. You trust your coach if you're Bob Quinn. Patricia likes these big, big guys, and he's one of those. So we'll see how he goes, how he does. And then with the final pick in the 2020 NFL Draft for the Detroit Lions in the 7th round at number 235, defensive lineman Ja'Shawn Cornell out of Ohio State. I think this was – all right, I didn't break down any of the other 7th round picks, but but for a 7th round pick, I love this, okay? First of all, played at a big school, played in big games against the top talent, okay? Played with and against those guys. He has the most advanced finesse pass rushing moves I've ever seen out of a guy that got drafted this late. Now, he's equally as bad at power moves as he is at finesse moves, which I think could hold him back in the system a little bit because as we've heard Patricia say before, it's all about strength, it's all about power, and that's it. Filling gaps, just being big, strong, fast. That's it. I don't think he's that concerned with IQ when it comes to D linemen, especially guys like this who are never going to drop back in pass coverage. They're never going to be switched to a linebacker role. Nothing like that's going to happen. But he can move in and around that line, at least on the front end of it, at the ends and the tackle positions. So this is a guy who, if you miss, you miss. If not, you could get something really good. I think he's got a higher ceiling than John Pennicini. And I think he, defensively, he's got a similar ceiling to some of these guys we took higher, some of the guys that were taken higher. I mean, he's probably not going to be Julian Okwara, but at the very tip top of his ceiling, he could probably be, close to that level of player. I don't know how he fell to the 7th round because he's just, the finesse is unreal. It's unreal. But I love it. I love it. Bob Quinn absolutely just murdered the first half of this draft, and then he came back and absolutely killed the second half of this draft. And now we just got to see if Patricia can coach these guys. We're all, as Lions fans, we're all in agreement that this was a good draft. So all I want to hear, if these players come in next season and can't play, that's on Patricia.
Yeah.
That's on Patricia 10 times out of 10. Okay. But I believe in it. Okuda, Swift, Okwara, Jackson, Logan Stenberg, Quintez Cephas, Jason Huntley, John Pennicini, and Jay Sean Cornell is your 2020 Lions draft class. And I'm not saying, the Lions are going to the Super Bowl. I'm not that guy, even though I kind of am that guy. But this team could compete for 8-8, 9-7, 10-6. And
who do you think wins the NFC North?
I have a hard time not saying the Packers because they have Aaron Rodgers. And it seems like he is actually going to be okay with taking Jordan Love in the first round. But I'm going to go with the Packers. I want to say the Lions. I think the Lions finished second. I think that Chicago's going to be a mess. They don't know what's going on with their quarterback room. Minnesota is I think they're going to have kind of a 1-year reload right here. I don't think it'll be a rebuild, but I think they're going to take a year where they win 7 games. As you said before on one of these shows, Dalvin Cook, it almost seems like he got lucky last season after all the injuries he's had in his past, and it almost seems like that clock's just ticking. We're not rooting for it, but just playing the odds, it seems like that's something that could likely happen. So I do think there will be kind of a down year for Minnesota, and Aaron Rodgers will just find a way to win 11 games.
I think the Lions are going to win with 10 wins this year. They're going to win.
I love it.
10 wins this year.
I absolutely love it. And by the way, for everybody watching at home, if you're too good for when the NFL schedule drops, if you're one of those people who's too good for going through a schedule 5 months before the season and predicting who's going to win, what games they're going to win and lose, well, that's too bad for you because you're missing half the fun of being a fan. But we will most definitely be doing that in the next couple of weeks.
Once the schedule comes out, we'll do that for sure.
Which I think is in a week. So, I'm going to go Packers, Lions, Vikings, Bears.
Okay, so you said Aaron Rodgers, and we're going to talk about kind of 5 things we learned from the draft. I think we kind of got there pretty nicely. So 5 things we learned from the draft. Why don't you give me one right now?
All right, my number one thing. I thought the Cardinals were at least 2 years away from being contenders. I would not be shocked if the Cardinals win 9 games next year. And at worst, I think they're 1 year away from being a real contender, and not just to make the playoffs, but to win a couple games once they get there. I absolutely love what this Cardinals team is doing. Kyler Murray, Isaiah Simmons this year. You traded for Nuke, Hopkins. I mean, they are killing it this offseason. Cliff Kingsbury, I think, proved last year that he can be an NFL coach.
Yeah.
So I'm bought in all the way on the Cardinals. I think in the next 4 years, you're going to see them competing for a Super Bowl. By next year, they're going to be competing to be a top level team in the league, a top 6 or 7 team in the league.
I think Kyler Murray actually is a little underrated right now.
I would agree.
That guy is going to light it up this year. I mean, no David Johnson. They didn't really have any running backs. They had year infinity of Larry Fitzgerald. They're going to be I think they drafted an lineman too later in a couple of them, picked one up. They're going to be really awesome. They're going to be a ton of fun.
They're just doing it right.
Red zone, you got to get them on red zone. They're going to be the ultimate red zone team this year.
Yeah, I love seeing a team that's doing it right. They're taking their time. They're not rushing anything. I think that is the biggest problem with half of the bad NFL franchise, half of the bad NBA franchises, and the Cardinals are absolutely doing it right now.
So this all leads me really nicely into one of my things that I learned, and it's that in the NFL, the middle class is greatly expanded, and it's actually good now. So I'm looking at teams like the Cardinals. I'm looking at the Bills. I'm looking at the Dolphins. I'm looking at the Lions. I'm looking at the Vikings. All of these teams, there's a big glut in the middle of really good, solid teams. And I think that we're kind of seeing a sea change. I think this is going to be a year where we really start to see the NFL change from the way it's looked over the last 5-10 years.
Yeah, we can see the Drew Breeses and the Saints starting to fall. Obviously, Brady's over in Tampa. It's probably not going to be a year where the Patriots compete for the Super Bowl with Jarrett Stidham as their quarterback. I mean, if you take the Patriots out of the last decade,
Patriots like Stidham.
I know, and a lot of people do.
Nervous.
He's got a big arm. So he was gonna be one of those Texas Tech light it up, throw it 80 yards quarterbacks until he went and visited. I heard this on a podcast. I can't remember who it is. I wish I could give him credit, but he went and visited Texas Tech and Cliff Kingsbury to see what was going on. He saw Patty Mahomes throw for 550 yards. He decommitted the next day. He was like, I can't do that. Yeah. So, but my point with what we were just talking about, if you take the Patriots out of the last decade and a half of football, it's the most parity-driven league out of all the major sports by far. I mean, you would have had a difference if it wasn't the Patriots. You would have had a different Super Bowl champion every single year this decade. Every single year. Nobody went back-to-back for the entire decade. I mean, the Patriots obviously won 3 Super Bowls, but they didn't even go back-to-back for any of those. So the parity is driven, and I think you're right. I think there's more coming. I think that the depth of the talent is getting deeper and deeper and deeper.
I think like teams like the Rams and the Seahawks are also maybe going to potentially slump backwards a little bit into that middle class.
Yeah.
And I think they're right. If they, I'm sorry, I'm going to start calling, what do they call it?
Washington.
The Washington professional football team.
Yes.
The Washington professional football team might also be a year or two away from being something too. We don't know.
If they can find a quarterback, because Dwayne Haskins is not it.
Doesn't seem like it.
I got one for you.
Cool.
And this is going to, if you've been listening, if you're a loyal listener, first of all, give us a comment. We'll give it a like down low.
Hopefully.
You know that I am all on board with running backs in the draft. I love Jonathan Taylor this year. I love J.K. Dobbins. I love, but what do you think? You're not. You know that I was all on. You know I was all on board for running backs in the first round this year.
Yeah.
But they're dead. Running backs in the first round is dead. I wasn't ever trying to fight the point that you don't need to take a running back 5th, 6th, 7th, something like that. But a mid to late first round pick, I think, is a perfect spot for the top running back in the draft, unless there's a Saquon Barkley and Ezekiel Elliott who will go higher. But this year proved it.
I think you either have to take them in the top 10 because they're Saquon Barkley, Ezekiel Elliott, or you just got to wait because they're not. I think that, like,
but how long do you think they have to wait?
Weird pick.
How long do you think when do you think, if you don't have the generational type talent at running back, if you have a Swift as the number 1 running back, do you think early second round is the spot, or do you think teams should be waiting even longer than that?
Mid-late second. I mean, I guess I with Swift, I guess we'll see, but that pick made sense for the Lions where they took him. I thought that was a logical pick. He's obviously a good player, but with running, so many running backs just don't pan out. Like, I don't know.
But you need multiple now. So it's not like you just hit on one and you're good for the next 10 years. You got to hit on 2 every 3 to 4 years.
If you were playing 3 quarterbacks or 3 tight ends at all the time, then I think the value of those guys would drop dramatically too.
That's fair. But those top end guys still change the game. They still change the game. It changes everything about a defense.
It's got to be to plug a hole of some kind.
I actually still think running backs are more important than wide receivers.
I disagree with that. I think
we've seen guys like Aaron Rodgers, guys like Tom Brady, and I know those are some of the greatest of all time, but if you're really looking to compete, you need a top-level quarterback that have made it work with low-level receivers. I think it's more about the scheme and the offense and the quarterback with receivers than it is with running backs. I think it's harder to find a true running back.
What?
I think it's harder to find a true running back, and there's just so many talented wide receivers all the time that everybody's kind of racing to get them. There's not as many talented running backs. This year there was 3 real choices for, like, really 2, but I throw a third in there, and J.K. Dobbins, for who, like, the top running back in the draft was. Swift, Taylor, Dobbins. There was 6 guys that could have went in the first round, and I don't think Jalen Reagor is better than DeAndre Swift. I don't think Laviska Shenault is better than DeAndre Swift.
Well, sure. But that's also like the 8th receiver in that draft. Shenault was like the 8th or 9th receiver taken, right?
Yeah, but I'm talking mid to late first round. So I'm not, I think Jerry Jeudy, CeeDee Lamb, those guys could be better than DeAndre Swift. But if you look at the last couple of years, N'Keal Harry was the first wide receiver taken last year before Metcalf, before Hollywood Brown. Mm-hmm. It's a crapshoot with the receivers. With the running backs, I think at least most of the time in the first round, you're getting it right. It's a higher percentage than wide receiver, where we've seen Sammy Watkins taken in the top 10 over the last decade. Obviously, like I just said, N'Keal Harry, there's so many instances of these guys just not working out.
Yeah. Receivers are tricky in the first round. I also think that like the jury's not out yet totally on N'Keal Harry.
No, it's definitely not. But just I think I think if you were making a bet on it, the odds would say a guy never turns into a Pro Bowler right now.
Yeah. Okay.
What else did you learn from the NFL draft?
The player empowerment era cuts both ways. It's great to be Aaron Rodgers. It's even better to be Aaron Rodgers' coach right now. Or Aaron Rodgers' GM, I should say. It's better to be Aaron Rodgers' GM.
How so? That interests me. I don't understand that.
Aaron Rodgers, the third best player in the NFL, one of the most influential figures, and one of the guys who I think is the most prone to kind of act out when things don't go his way, still got a quarterback drafted in the first round. And then they drafted a running back they didn't need in the second round, which to me is kind of a big middle finger to Aaron Rodgers, or at least the back end of his career. To me, they're telling Aaron Rodgers, like, you can hit bricks or you can produce, like, we're ready. Whatever you want to do, man, balls in your court.
Yep, I had a very similar thing here written actually, where I don't think the Packers are trying to move on from Aaron Rodgers, but I think they're trying to be ready for when the day comes. Because everything we've heard about Aaron Rodgers, nothing to me says this guy is going to go into the front office a year before his final season and say, I'm retiring after this year. It's going to be like the day before the draft. He's like, I'm good. I'm not going to play football anymore.
You're going to burn the building down.
Yeah, I think you really, with a guy like Aaron Rodgers, all the stories we've all heard, you got to be prepared for that exit because I don't think it'll be pretty. However, just off topic a little bit, he better not treat Jordan Love like Brett Favre treated him, because I've heard him complain about it a million times. A million times I've heard him complain about it. And if he goes out and does the same exact thing, then that guy is just a fraud through and through.
I like it. Let's move to the next one.
All right, what you got? Or do you want me to go?
I got a good one. I think that the Cowboys aren't going to re-sign Dak Prescott.
I agree.
Oh, really? I
agree 100%. Dak Prescott's asking for $40 million.
Yeah, they're just not going to do it.
You can't.
You know, he's their safety valve. They signed him a 2-year contract. They can take a year. They can take a quarterback next year. You know, wouldn't it be kind of Cowboysy to trade somebody and trade up to get Trevor Lawrence?
Boy, that would be something. And I mean, it would be that would be a power move by Jerry Jones.
Sure. King of the power moves.
But like, you just paid Amari Cooper $100 million. You're gonna pay Zeke. You can't pay your quarterback $40 million. You're gonna have 60% of your cap tied up into 3 guys. You're gonna be the Lions from the early 2010s when they had Sue, Calvin, and Stafford on 3 out of the 5 biggest contracts in the league. It's just not possible to build. You got to remember, these teams aren't just trying to build contenders, or at least the good ones. They're trying to build consistent contenders, and you can't do that with Dak Prescott at $40 million. And Amari Cooper at $100 million, and Zeke at $100 million. There won't be enough around them. And those guys, even Zeke lately over the last 2 years, they're not good enough for that. They're good. They're 8-8 to 10-6 in a really good year, maybe a tiny bit better, but they're not. Dak Prescott isn't Drew Brees. He isn't Aaron Rodgers. I don't even think he's Matt Stafford.
He might look this year.
Well, I mean, that offense has got some pieces, but if you want to keep those pieces for the long term, you can't pay him $40 million. And as we've seen over the last 4 or 5 years, this quarterback talent is getting better and better and better and better and better. These first round guys have really been hitting lately. So I think your best bet is to move off Dak next year. If you get off to a slow start this year, maybe you trade him to a team whose quarterback gets hurt, something along those lines. But I think he'll be a free agent come next offseason, and nobody's paying him $40 million.
Somebody will.
It would ruin their franchise for the next 6 years.
Well, like the Jaguars.
Sure, it would ruin their franchise for the next 6 years, though. The Jaguars definitely make sense. The Jaguars make sense. The Bengals make sense. Somebody I don't know, I guess not the Chargers now that they took Herbert, but what? Well, I'm thinking before the draft, but teams along those lines make sense of consistently underwhelming. trying to make a splash, and whoever signs them to $40 million a year is just throwing away their future, throwing it in the trash, setting the trash on fire, waiting for it to burn out, and then throwing some logs in there and setting it on fire again just to make sure it's all ash. So
why don't you give me one more?
Now this one isn't, I'm not blowing anybody away with a hot take here. But I think the Ravens are Super Bowl contenders for the next 4 to 5 years minimum with Lamar Jackson healthy. Super Bowl contenders. They had 12 Pro Bowlers last year. They had the 4th most cap space in football going into this offseason. They had an awesome draft. I think the Ravens are going to be as good as anybody for as good as we can guess for anybody else.
They've built on both ends. I mean, that defense is going to be scary this year. I don't think the Lions are going to play the Ravens. I hope not. I don't want to play the Ravens.
I also don't want to play the Ravens. I don't think Patricia could handle Lamar Jackson. I don't think he'd know what to do. Although I guess we've seen from Patricia, that's kind of when he stands out. When you get into nobody knows how to stop this guy, Patricia finds a way to stop him. But then he'll go up against
for creating the blueprint to beat the Rams 2 years ago or whatever. Patriots.
Yeah. The interesting little fact about the Ravens, they added an undrafted free agent quarterback from Utah that beat Lamar Jackson in high school, but he's like another fast guy who can do a lot. I'm interested to see how that guy goes because I think they'll kind of use them in similar ways. And the reason why it's important is because now when you're trying to get that first team defense, some looks at a player like Lamar Jackson, it doesn't have to be Lamar Jackson in there taking the hits, running too much, tearing his hamstring, doing anything like that. So I think something like that is very important. They just hit all the boxes. John Harbaugh is one of the best coaches in football. They're fun. They're young. They run the ball. They throw the ball. And they still have a ton of room to grow in the throwing the ball department. Hollywood Brown's only going to get better. Who they draft at running back this year? They got J.K. Dobbins. I mean, him and Mark Ingram, that's an awesome 1-2 punch. With a ton of versatility between them. So I think the Ravens have at least a 5-year window to go get this Super Bowl.
My last one, I'm going to combine 2 into 1, and it's that the Raiders and the Seahawks are still the Raiders and the Seahawks. The Seahawks are out here drafting guys with 3rd-round grades at 24, and the Raiders are just taking the fastest player on the board. Good for them for sticking their guns, That's it.
Well, this decade of Seahawks drafting has really been amazing because the first half of it, they were the best team in the late rounds and with undrafted guys. That's how they built the Legion of Boom.
When they won the Super Bowl, they had like 4 Hall of Famers on rookie contracts.
Yeah, those guys were all like 3rd round and later. A lot of them in the 6th and 7th round. They had like a 4-year stretch where everybody they took in the 5th and 6th round was on their roster, which is unheard of. It's something Quinn's doing right now, by the way. We'll see if it continues. But then they just took this dive, and I don't know if they got too stubborn and stuck in their ways, but they took this just nosedive down to the bottom, and they don't know who to draft anymore. Nothing works out, and it's becoming the Packers of the NFC West, where it's Russell Wilson or it's bust. So,
give me one more. We got a couple things we got to do.
All right. My last one. The Eagles aren't all the way bought in on Carson Wentz, and I think if what's his name goes in there and outplays him during preseason and training camp. Thank you, Jalen Hurts outplays him during training camp. I don't think he'll get the job right away, but if Wentz comes out and has a rough start to the season, it's Philly, man. Those fans will start yelling for him, and it might happen. I'd be shocked, but I wouldn't be unbelievably shocked if we saw Jalen Hurts this year at some point without an injury to Wentz as the starting quarterback of the Eagles.
I think that it seems like an injury to Carson Wentz is almost guaranteed. So
he hasn't finished a year in 3 seasons.
And they won a title without him, so I don't know. I like Jalen Hurts, and I wonder how much we'll look back on the Lincoln Riley Oklahoma thing and wonder how much of that was real and how much of that was him. But
I always have the vision stuck in my head of Jalen Hurts at Alabama, which is not a great quarterback, and the Jalen Hurts at Oklahoma was flinging the ball, just absolutely flinging it.
Let's see. I think it's a good test case for Lincoln Riley's quarterbacks coming into the NFL. I think we'll work on it.
I agree.
Let's move on to the Jordan doc real quick. Just to touch on it, because it is like the most important sports thing that's happening like in this moment, kind of excluding the end of the world or whatever. Obviously, we have the most 90s photograph in the history of photographs, real quick. Very 90s. Very 90s.
This is the best sports documentary I've ever seen.
Oh my gosh, everybody should be so proud. It's so great. The footage of like them in the locker room talking shit about Kobe at the All-Star game in 93, I think it was like
97.
97. Oh, excuse me. 97. Oof.
98, actually, I think. Sorry. Might have been 97. Anyways.
It's really something. Larry Bird coming in and going, well, since we're here, we might as well win, and like being very serious about it.
Yeah, it's really amazing. It's super honest. Mm-hmm. They're not trying to demigod Jordan like everything else he's been in since he's retired is done, which I love. But my first takeaway from it, and something I really want to discuss, is how different is the landscape of like sports merchandising if he chooses Adidas. Adidas, he wanted, for those of you who haven't seen it or forgot, he wanted to go to Adidas right out of college when he was starting to get all these deals offered to him, but they wouldn't let him get his own signature shoe. He did not want to go to Nike. He wouldn't even get on the plane and go meet him until his mom told him, get your ass on that plane and at least hear what you have to say, or his dad maybe. And then Nike offered him the shoe, obviously the Air Jordan, the most iconic shoe in the history of sneakers. How different do you think the sports merchandising landscape would look?
Imagine if he'd signed with Puma.
Well, that would have made more sense back then.
This is a very specific joke for like 10 people, but Jordan signing with Nike irreversibly affected track and field. And I'm going to let that one sit for the couple of people who know what I'm talking about, but we can move past it.
Okay. Do you think, so obviously the shoe push had already started. Dr. J, some of the guys in the 70s and 80s. Clyde probably didn't have one yet. I'm sorry?
When does Sal Vulcano show up? He's the shoe guy, right? He's kind of the godfather.
No, Sal Vulcano is the guy from Impractical Jokers.
No, fuck, dude. All right, keep talking. Hang on a
second. So he showed up about 2010. But I don't know if Adidas has the ability, especially back then, to handle it the same way Nike did. Converse would have had the abilities. Puma, even back then, I think may have had the ability to do it with the shoe, but Adidas just didn't really know what to do. And I think he obviously found the treasure chests of all treasure chests. What's his name?
Sonny Vaccaro. I think I got like 80% of the way there on both ways.
Yeah, you did. You were almost there. But I just think it's absolutely. I never knew that. I never knew Mike wanted to sign with Adidas, and to me, that might be one of the best what ifs that's come out of this documentary.
For years and years of Dick's Sporting Goods.
For all of you dummies at home, yeah, I called you dummies, who think Jordan's sock was soaked in blood.
Go off.
It wasn't soaked in blood. I've worn Air Jordans and played basketball. He wore Air Jordans and played basketball for like half a decade. It was the only basketball shoe that was worn by anybody from 1985 to 1990. But his fucking foot was bleeding when he got off the court after one half of a half-paced basketball game. Kiss my ass, Michael Jordan. You're a liar. And it wasn't like a light jab of, oh, my feet were bleeding, like exaggerating. He was trying to make everybody believe he played that game with a bleeding bottom of his feet, which is the most asinine, ridiculous, made-up bullshit I've ever heard in my entire life. Do you believe him for 1 second?
I'd like to believe Jordan because of how honest he is throughout the documentary. I think that like his honesty should prove a little bit of a reasonable doubt, and I can see. I guess it's interesting though that because he says he's wearing shoes from 1980. What is it, 1988 or 89 or whatever?
I think he got his first shoe in 85 or 86.
I mean, like the Olympics were happening for hundreds of years before that, so I'm like he had to wear a shoe that he knew was going to hurt his foot.
Yeah,
I certainly think that there's a storytelling aspect to that story. You know,
yeah.
I mean,
like your foot might have been sore. but that's not worth a story.
I play sports in our life, and I've had it happen where I like took a shoe off and was like, ugh, and I didn't know it
For
was
sure.
happening.
We've all been there, but we didn't try to convince everybody the bottom of our foot was ripped off and we were losing blood at a level that we were going to be dead in 8 minutes. Like,
Jordan
it's
just barely missed getting gangrene. Okay,
ridiculous.
so I'm going to yell about the Jordan doc about a thing I don't give a shit about either, and that's the 92 Dream Team. I don't give a shit about the 92 Dream Team. The footage of those like legendary practices is really cool, and I've heard a lot about them, but I've never seen the footage. But I don't. The thing about the Olympics is that there's hundreds and hundreds of events, I think, somewhere in there, and we won 1 gold medal in a sport that nobody else in the world played, and we were all high-fiving each other doing the America is so great thing, when, like, the second best team is Croatia, and they have Tony Kukoc before he was Tony Kukoc. Like, what are you talking about?
So the reason I think the Dream Team was so cool is because prior to that, it was only collegiate players and amateurs who were playing for us in the Olympics. There was an NBA player. Right, and I think we're only about a decade away from seeing that again. I think we're gonna get that again, and then I think it might do like an every other type deal. But I think that's why people love it so much. Before that, outside of the All-Star game, they had never seen, like, we go on Twitter during the offseason and we see a pickup game that has Melo, Chris Paul, Harden, LeBron, Anthony Davis, whatever. People back then, they hadn't seen anything like that except for once a year during the All-Star game, and it wasn't that good. It's 2 times as good as an All-Star team. So I got to disagree with you on that one. I love the Dream Team stuff. Obviously, Isaiah Thomas got screwed. All of us here in Detroit know that. Michael Jordan, another lie he told. When I say the documentary is honest, I mean the filmmakers are being honest. I don't mean Michael Jordan's honest when he's talking about somebody else. He's not honest when he's talking about himself. When he came on the screen and said he had nothing to do with keeping Isaiah Thomas off the Dream Team, like, you can't lie about something we all know. You can't do it.
I think that, like, later they talk about how, like, Bird and Magic also kind of sort of like a confluence of things, and I think that I might take the point that it wasn't just Jordan who didn't want to play with him.
So it was Michael Wilbon that came out and said that. He said that there was 8 players that were opposed to it, and then he actually had to apologize on Twitter yesterday because he got so many texts from people saying that's not true.
Really?
Yeah, Michael Wilbon was out there.
I love Wilbon, man. I
do too. I've loved Wilbon since I was a kid. I got to hear him cuss the other day for the first time. That was cool and weird.
I love Wilbon, and I would like to look into that more and see how much truth there is. Because now it's its own. It seems like it's its own story now. But I do believe that there were people other than Jordan who didn't want to play with Isaiah, and I think that's the price Isaiah pays for being the kind of player he was and the kind of team he was. Sure, he won some championships, but he didn't make any friends along the way. He's like a reality show contestant. He's not here to make friends. He's here to win. Yeah,
but I don't know. I think one of the main things we've learned so far through the first 6 episodes is Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen are petty little bitches sometimes.
Well,
they're super petty.
I genuinely think I could be friends with Scottie Pippen. I think that guy and I have some things.
Sure, but the second you get on his bad side and he's got somebody else to back him up, he thinks he's he's like one of those guys. You know what I'm saying? The second he sees a little bit of opening, he takes it, whether it's with Krause, Kukoc, whatever. I like Scottie, though. I just think that those 2 guys are super petty.
You have to apply your mask before helping others apply theirs.
Yeah. Michael Jordan wouldn't have been able to handle Twitter in today's world.
I think he would have been okay because assuming he's in the era of Twitter, he came up in the era of Twitter, and those kids are so polished by the time they're 18, 19, 20 years old. I think he would have eventually figured it out. But definitely I think it would have worn on him, but we've seen it wear on people like Kevin Durant. We've seen it wear on
Kevin Love has talked about it with all of his anxiety issues. A lot of that comes from that. I mean, we saw during this documentary, during episode 6, he had 3 days where people were pissed at him because he drove to Atlantic City when he was down 2-0 in a series against the Knicks. Can you fucking imagine what would happen if, like, I don't know, Matthew Dellavedova did that in a series they were down 2-0, let alone a guy like LeBron James or a guy like Anthony Davis or Kawhi Leonard? It would be chaos. He couldn't handle it for 3 days. He went media silent for 3 weeks after it. He wouldn't have been able to handle it. He's a little bit softer than we thought, Parker. Just a little bit softer.
There's a current NBA example of somebody who's kind of wired like that. Is James Harden. There's so many stories of James Harden buying all the liquor out of a nightclub and then leaving. Like James Harden's kind of like that, and I think that with guys like that, when your greatness is at that level and when you're built that way, that I sympathize with the idea that he needed to go golf to like just be not in a hotel room. That is a feeling
For
that
sure.
I, like A1 understand, especially right now. You know, you got to get out. You just get stuck inside, and it fucking sucks. We all get that. I think he would be okay in the era of Twitter. I do think that every once in a while he'd tell somebody to fuck off, though. I think he'd be like a media guy, though. He'd be going to like Dave Portnoy and being like, Dave, you don't know fucking nothing about no nothing.
Kind of like Richard Sherman talking to Skip Bayless. Yeah, similar to that. I pretty much I have two last things I want to talk about. One of them, I just have to say it real quick. And for any of you at home who remember and understand this joke, that guy stole the show for the documentary. But I just want you to watch this money roll right into my pocket. And then the last thing I want to talk about, that guy is a star. I want to meet that guy in real life. Last thing I want to talk about now. Oh, yeah, probably. Wait, do you know that for sure?
Yeah, you're talking about the guy who beat Jordan in quarters, right? Blonde hair, the blonde, whatever. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that guy's dead.
Oh, well, that's too bad.
Absolutely.
Then I guess we'll move on to the last thing, which I'm going to ask you this first. How good do you think those New York Knicks teams would be today? Or those Blazer teams with Clyde, how good would they be today?
I don't think those Blazers teams with Clyde would be. They'd be. I don't know. They'd be like. They'd probably
at
be
best the Blazers.
I think they need.
Yeah, sure.
But with the Knicks teams, what referees are we using? Are we using 90s referees or are we using today's referees?
Everything's modern day. Everything.
Well, I don't think that they'd be that good. Because I think the thing about those Knicks teams is that if you took like modern teams you brought them back then, and then they played those Knicks teams, that the Knicks teams would just beat the shit out of them. I mean, that much we know for sure. Ewing would break some noses, you know. John Starks would be doing it. An Austin Rivers impression, you know. I just think it would. I think that they'd be good in the '90s, but not good now. I don't think the way that they play is the way basketball is now.
Yeah, I would agree. And when I have these discussions, I always like to keep it where we're not giving anybody any leeway. Like, just because you played in the 80s doesn't mean you necessarily could shoot threes in the 2010s. Even if you probably could because you would have worked on it, that's not the player you were. So we're not going to, add these skills to you to pretend like you are. It's why basketball has gotten better over the last 30 years, over the last 40 years, over the last 10 years even, is because the skill sets keep growing. So you can't just, give guys these skills, I don't think. But today, dude, I don't think they're any better than, the Denver Nuggets at best. I
think the comp for those Knicks teams might kind of be those Josh Smith Pistons teams, kind of in a way.
That's not horrible. It's not horrible.
Perfect, but it's kind of close.
No, it's not. They'd be better than that. But wouldn't. They are
those original Blake Griffin, Andre Drummond teams.
They'd win 47 games. 48 games.
Yeah. Sure, but if
they're a 4 seed.
In the 90s, I don't think that there are a lot of modern teams that they couldn't beat if you can get down the way that they did back then.
Oh, well, again, so I take the same logic where you give the guys all the skills. If you put a team from today in the 90s, especially the mid-90s, when the three-point shot is a mid-range shot because they moved it in 3 feet, which people love to forget when they talk about Jordan's 40% three-point shooting one season, you imagine Steph Curry if the three-point line was 3 feet closer.
Yeah,
he'd score 60 points a game.
I think that team broke the math of basketball in a way that we won't see again anytime soon.
Yeah, but it's broke now, right? The whole league's broke now with the 3-point shooting because the math adds up. 3 is always greater than 2, 100% of the time. I think everybody's feeling what.
When you meditate, is that what you say to yourself? 3
yes. Yes. My 90s anti-bias has really come out during this show. Really bad.
The most offensive we've ever been.
Yes. Yeah, we're definitely pushing some nerves. You want to get in?
Potentially most offensive segment of the show, though, depending on how this goes.
Well, at least we know we're not that offensive. If this is our cap, we're not super offensive.
We're just kids who are going to get yelled at by older sports fans.
Yeah.
We're going to do a segment based on something that you and I have had a lot of fun with over the last couple of weeks, and that is Cameo. So for those of you who don't know what Cameo is, Cameo is what you use to get this wonder.
This is Rick Mahorn.
That thing that we use to open the show and we play sometimes for fun is from an app called Cameo. For those of you who aren't familiar, right now there are a lot of celebrities on it raising money for COVID-19, and you can send them like requests for like you can ask them questions and they'll send you video answers or whatever, and they all have a price. So it kind of looks like there's all sorts of people on here. We've got like Brett Favre. We've got, who else do I have on here? Holly Madison from The Girls Next Door. I mean, there's all sorts of, you can get really deep. Here's Fessy from season, that's not Fessy. Oh, no.
It's almost Fessy. They look alike.
There we go. No.
Anyways, that's Enes Kanter from the NBA. There's Fessy.
That's Fessy from season 20 of Big Brother. That's like kind of a deep cut from you and I.
He was on American Ninja Warrior?
And he was on MTV's The Challenge.
Oh, I saw him on The Challenge. I saw him on that. I did not know he was on Ninja Warrior. I got to see that.
Oh, I'm sure he doesn't do well. He's much too bulky to do well on American.
I would agree. Same with The Challenge. With The Challenge. I bet he doesn't do that well.
But you can see book now for $33 or whatever. It's kind of a sliding price scale. Obviously, like Brett Favre is $400, and they'll send you personalized messages. I recently used Cameo to squash petty beefs with my friend Sam, and that actually looked like this.
Hey Sam, it is Chef Graham Elliott here in Chicago. Okay.
Oh, Sam thinks that cornbread is a sandwich.
Hey Sam, it is Chef Graham Elliott here in Chicago. Okay, a couple things. Parker reached out, and I know that you're a foodie, you like the cooking shows, things like that. So first and foremost, I hope right now, while we're locked inside, you're doing what I'm doing and a lot of other chefs are doing, which is going through your cupboards and freezer, finding ingredients you maybe thought you'd never have to work with, and really get in there and experiment, come up with some new recipes and ideas. One thing I want to really reiterate, not only those old sayings like less is more, make sure you season, stuff like that, but also remember, cornbread is not a sandwich. I don't know who came up with that idea. Usually the argument is a hot dog a sandwich or a taco because, it's got technically a piece of bread or, something in between it. Cornbread ain't got that going on for it. So no, not a sandwich. Anyway, I love cornbread. So make me some, let me try it. Look forward to cooking for you sometime soon. Until then, make sure you're staying safe and know that we're all gonna get through this and be stronger for it. And hopefully.
Shut up. Oh man. Anyway, so we're gonna play a game of like underrated, overrated, properly rated for the prices of people to have a cameo sent from them. We got like 10 minutes left, so we're gonna do something a little silly. Let's start with this one. Tom Bergeron, host of Dancing with the Stars, and of course America's Funniest Videos. $100 for Tom Bergeron to send you a personally gifted message. You can say some dumb bullshit like cornbread isn't a sandwich. Where do you feel on that?
I think that's appropriately rated. I think it's closer to underpriced than it is overpriced, but I think he's got that spot on. I think there's just kind of a small market of people who are like, oh, Tom Bergeron is the guy I want out of all these people.
Enes Kanter, who I accidentally showed like 3 times, $50 for Enes Kanter to come on and call you a wuss or whatever it is that he's going to do.
That one's tough. I would pay $1, but I think there's a lot of people. No, he's overpriced. I'm going to go overpriced because nobody likes Enes Kanter.
You know who really doesn't like Enes Kanter is the government of Turkey.
Yes, specifically.
How about this one? This is one I really like. Kevin McDonald from Kids in the Hall, and also like a gajillion things with funny voices. I actually think this one is underrated because of the amount of like levity and like classic characters he can do in a birthday message to your like little cousin or something. You know what I mean? $40. Give me Kevin McDonald for the best birthday gift for an 8-year-old you ever did.
I dig it.
Chet Hanks, who most people will know as the worst Hank's son. There's a lot in this profile from his bio that says just fucking around, from the fact that he defines himself not only as a rapper but also as a singer-songwriter. But I think the most important thing here is that it's $295 for a message from Chet Hanks.
And this is the same guy, by the way, that 2 weeks ago told us if we talk shit about his parents, we're going to be taken away to secret camps and be murdered. That's a real thing, he said. Like, that is, he wants $295 because his dad, who, by the way, is worth $500 billion, not an exaggeration. $500 billion is probably just like, I'm not giving this douchebag any money. Like, I'm cutting him off. I'm sick of him. That is the second most overpriced cameo on that entire app.
We're going to move into this. Okay. Rod Blagojevich, former governor of Illinois and pistachio salesman, will send you a message for $75. I will note that Rod Blagojevich does not have a charity connected with his cameo. Rod Blagojevich in it. I like this review right here. It says, sincere, authentic, and intelligent. Rod is a great person and has a great family. And that was, of course, not written by Rod Blagojevich.
Yeah, I was about to say, that sure sounds a lot like it was written by him. That's a good one. That's because what else better to do you have when you're a former governor than connect with fans? Like, what?
For my grandparents' anniversary, they're a political type. I was very seriously considering buying them a message from Rod Blagojevich to be like, hey, Tony and Joyce, heard it's your 54th wedding anniversary. Wow, that's great.
So I don't think you have pictures for these, but I'm going to give you 3 that I think are underpriced, and I want you to tell me which one you think is the best.
Okay.
Chris Hansen for $50.
Yeah.
You might know Chris Hansen from a multitude of things, including To Catch a Predator.
Personally.
Correct. Brett the Hitman Hart for $150, or Tommy Chong for $150. Which one of those is the most undervalued, if you will?
I think Tommy Chong for $150 is pretty good. It depends on what I'm getting from Tommy Chong. I feel like if I can get Tommy Chong to like light up in my cameo,
and not just like a joint, like a fatty. Like
yeah, weird like cross joint,
yeah,
or whatever. Then I'm in. Chris Hansen for $50 is interesting. I just hope it's like Chris Hansen's is like. Oh, I went the wrong way. You like start out over here, and you're like, "Hello, I'm Chris Hansen. Please take a seat and listen to my message."
The cameo starts with a girl on screen. She goes, "Hold on, I gotta go change," and then she walks off, and Chris Hansen comes on. I'm gonna go Chris Hansen because now that scenario is playing out in my head, and that's the winner. Winner, chicken dinner.
Here are what else do I have here? Okay.
Show them the most. Do you have the most overpriced one in the whole app up there? You have to.
The 2 most overrated ones I could find, and then a third one. I'm gonna do this one real quick. Gary Busey in a little propeller hat, like Daddy's little fancy boy, for $350. And I love this. You can send a script, but Gary will most likely riff. Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, he's a person that every single time I see him, whether it's in a show, movie, or in a picture where he's wearing a propeller hat, he looks more insane than he did the previous time I saw him.
He has like resting crack face, I feel like.
And then the next one is what you get when you go 9 for 9 from 3 one time.
Ben Gordon.
700 bones. Like,
NBA-Chicago Bulls, and it doesn't say Pistons until you get to the very bottom of the page where it does say Pistons. 11-year NBA vet and Triple O CEO. He's got his Triple O hat on. He's got his Cameo shirt on. Ben Gordon out here trying to pay his mortgage.
I'm so dumb that I read that as 11-year NBA vet. Ooh, CEO. Ooh, CEO. Yeah, that's. Do you think? And nobody's bought that, right? Not a single soul on the planet.
2 reviews.
It had to be famous people. It had to be other famous people. I wish you could go and see. Can you go and see the reviews?
Yeah, you can look at some of them. Yeah, you can look at some stuff. People leave comments and stuff. I gotta leave Graham Elliott the one that I like a very nice comment for putting like a very nice message together. For my
that's awesome.
Joke. And then there's this one, John Daly, the Grip It and Rip It King, the drinking, the smoking, the $750 for a quick hello. I love it. I can't think of a single person who would be able to afford this and who also would want this.
So I'm more likely to pay $750 for John Daly than I am Ben Gordon, especially with the fact that that old man typically responds in 1 hour. It took Rick Mahorn like 6 days to get mine. He typically responds in 1 hour. So John Daly's just sitting there waiting for $750 at all points of the day.
To get yours from Rick Mahorn? It took me 40 hours to get mine from Graham Elliott.
Yeah, 4 or 5, 6 days, something like that. I don't remember. We do appreciate it, though, Rick. Thank you so much for doing it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, for sure.
Also, you're welcome for the money.
I forgot the most underrated, the best deal of all, and it is Santa Claus benefiting No Kid Hungry, $15. Typically responds in 3 hours. Love it. Send your message to Santa. Santa will get back to you for $15. You know.
And you know, as a non-parent, I'm out here with parenting tips. When November rolls around, you pay $15 and you have them tell your kid to stop being an idiot, and your kid will stop being an idiot. So, all right, that's all I got for Cameo. Do you got anything else?
The only other thing I thought was funny is Hugh Jackson in what appears to be the sun closing in rapidly on his estate. $50 to barely see Hugh Jackson.
Yeah, dude, it's a little bright there. Well, anyways, we will be back next Tuesday, 6:30 to 8 on the Planet Ant YouTube, the Planet Ant Facebook. I'm your host, Andrew Norris. This is my producer, Double P, producer Parker. For both of us, go follow us at Fan2Fan Detroit, at Fan2Fan Drew, and at Parker_Hammond. Give us a like and a subscribe for the Planet Ant on YouTube, and we will see you guys next week. Thank you. Peace.
We got the fun, what did we call it?
Fun clip of the week. Fun sports clip of the week.
It's courtesy of Lakers forward Josh Hart's Twitch stream, and it's a pretty good one. Be safe out there, everybody. Oh, thank you to the dozens and dozens and dozens of people who reached out to me to talk about soccer. I appreciate all of you, and I had a good time. Bye, everybody.
Not a fan, bro. Oh,
right, so ain't nobody just gonna go A, right?
Go Johnson. Oh, no. Say flash.
How do you shoot me and I'm behind a wall? That makes no sense.
This game.
They all
Those
big.
are chemo. Oh my God.
So overpowered.
Who was that?